this week's episode of the Marketing Chief Podcast, we welcome brand strategist and communication expert Brian Tipping, a partner in the creative brand marketing agency, The Jakes Group, to the podcast. We take an in-depth look at strong communication and branding strategies, creative that touches your emotions, and a look back at the heyday of the pizza wars and what it was like to be in the middle of all of the action. Stay tuned for this week's edition of the Marketing Chief Podcast. Welcome to the Marketing Chief Podcast. I'm your host, Rob Collins. If you'd like to watch this podcast instead of just listen to it, head over to our website and click on the Episodes tab at marketingchiefpodcast.com or search for Marketing Chief Podcast on YouTube. Today, I'm pleased to welcome a former colleague, a friend, a mentor, someone I respect highly, Brian Tipping. Welcome to the Marketing Chief Podcast.
Hey, thanks, Mr. Collins. It's nice to be here.
Brian, you have such a great career. Agency side, client side, retail, entertainment.
Yes.
It's so broad.
Yes.
Tell us what you're doing now, and then we'll dive into some of your experiences from the past.
Yeah, right now, about a year and a half ago, I joined a great small little brand consulting and creative shop called the Jakes Group. I worked with Laura Jakes many moons ago, but have always been highly impressed with her and her not only background and her talents, but you've been around long enough to know that in our business there are art directors and creative directors who are good at what they do, but they don't really move into the area of artist, right? Mm-hmm. And what I like about Laura, love about Laura, is that she has the spirit of an artist. She's the president of the local Arts Commission. She always views things through that business lens, but she can't help but bring that true creative spirit to everything she does. And I really think that makes a big difference when you look at things not through necessarily the technical, artistic eye or, the academic, but that true artistic spirit comes out. And she's won a ton of awards. And so the idea that when we were talking a couple of years ago about when I had my own consulting firm about, you do this brand consultant work and it's dynamite. And I've got this creative flair and little group that I'm working with. And what do you think if we just bring them together? And so about a year and a half ago, we decided to do that. And just in time for, the COVID thing.
Right. It's a story of 2020.
Yeah, we're off to the races. She's always had a solid underpinning of business. And when I started sharing with people that we were joining forces that knew us both, there was actually a lot of earnest and eager desire to work with us. Mm-hmm. And so we've been fortunate to get through the COVID thing by having a couple of really good supportive clients and really just really good creative product.
So it's really interesting, isn't it, how inspired you can be by being around very creative people?
Yeah, I think it's difficult. My background is communications, rhetorical theory. So I consider myself a communications person first, and then I consider myself a brand professional because a lot of the things that attach to communication theory also attach well to brand theory and brand strategy. So, and then I kind of even ladder up then to marketing. So it's a very natural, seamless progression. But since my academic background was in rhetoric, rhetorical theory, public speaking, audience analysis, all the things we do as brand professionals and marketers, I can't help but think that way. That's the upfront work, right? That's right. That's the stuff that I enjoy. That's the stuff that I've always been kind of motivated to do great work around. You get a brand and you want me to look at it, you're going to see me smiling. But what we're sometimes missing is that strong connection between strategy and creative. How do you interpret all those elements, the audience input the product input, the competitive input, the identity, the positioning. How do you take all that, put it in a really nice package, and make a difference creatively? Really not just create something that makes sense, but something that's meaningful, something that's going to advance the brand. And so yeah, I get inspired by creative people who can really. It's almost like, to me, it's like a band. If you got a great guitar player who's just kind of freelancing and freestyle, and you got a drummer who can pick it up, and then you got a bass player who can jump. It sounds like a jam session, right? And
Yeah,
when
absolutely.
it's working, it's awesome. And when it's not working, you say, hey, time out. You got to tune that up a little bit because you're not keeping up with me, or whatever it might be. And we've got a great relationship today between Laura and I and the team, that I think we're always very honest about, hey, come on, let's talk a little harder, let's move a little faster or whatever, to make sure we're meeting the client need, not just our creative needs, right?
Well, and it's easy. I think the band analogy is really interesting because you need all of those parts and you can tell when something is out of sync. And the one thing I've really appreciated and learned from you over the years is you're such a brand strategist.
Yeah.
That the strategy has to come first before the creative is manifested, and you're really honing in on a customer need or a product attribute or something to build that connection with the customer. Give me an example of something you've worked on in the past where you really felt like, man, we nailed that strategy and it was so good for the consumer and it really elevated the brand. Can you think of something that might fit that?
When I was doing work with Lazy Boy, I had two things really going for me during that time. And I think the agency and the client did some great work together at that time. One of the things was awesome, smart clients. Mm-hmm. I mean, there was a woman there named Jen Sievertson who was at Motorola first, came to Lazy Boy, is now with Dave Ramsey as their chief marketing officer. Brilliant. I mean, just you know what it's like when you're working with people who have been in this, they get it, you're speaking the same language, you're using the same dictionary, and you have an open, honest relationship. So you get the call from the client, says, Brian, I don't know what to do. You kind of backed me into a corner here. Can you help me get out of it? But we had that relationship that allowed you to do that. So one of the things we did with Lazy Boy, this is the good news, bad news one, right? I'll tell you that we built a really strong strategy together, because Lazy Boy, as you probably know, is pretty well known for their recliners.
Right. Absolutely.
But they're not really well known.
I've slept in plenty of them.
They're an awesome product, right? There's a reason they're right. Well known for it. But they weren't as well known for their other furniture, right? Which was really awesome. And when this group came in, the group that I just mentioned came in, whether it be Doug Collier or Jen Sievertson or Mark Wagner or Leslie Verrill, this team was awesome. And they knew that they had to elevate the brand and take it beyond that. So we had the strategy as an agency, and we're working through this. We were given the opportunity to help them move some things forward in terms of a campaign. So we layered everything on, and we came up with what I thought was a great strategic approach, which was simplify, leverage the brand, because it is a powerful brand. I mean, and there's a lot of equity behind it. And so the line that, as the agency came up with, was relax. It's a Lazy Boy. Relax, and it's nice. It works in a couple different ways there, right?
Yes.
And it borrows the equity of what was built up over the years. Lazy Boy, if anything, is known as a relaxing experience, right? Mm-hmm. Comfortable. That's what they wanted to be known for. But it also instills that confidence that says, relax. You don't have to worry about A, B, C, or D. It's a Lazy Boy, for crying out loud. Just buy it.
Right.
And so the good news was that I felt really strongly about that. The bad news is that the client did not. They actually wanted to, I don't know if they were comfortable leaning on their heritage. They actually wanted to feed into it more. And they went with something about, I don't remember it exactly, but it was something about the original Lazy Boy and how you can trust it because of that. I thought it was a little longer. I thought it was I pushed back a little bit because, as you know, agency who's been on that side of the other side of the desk, sometimes you need a little push. But in the end, they didn't go with it. I still think it's a rock solid strategy. I'd pitch it again today.
Trademark it.
Pardon me?
Trademark it.
It's strong.
It is strong.
Sometimes the best stuff you think is great, for whatever reason, somebody else doesn't. And you got to not think of it as a personal, whatever. You just got to say, you know what? They're in it. They know things that I don't. They may have seen some research I don't have. They may have seen, maybe their attorneys knocked it. It's always hard to know. But all you can do is do your best work.
Well, and that, man, I love that. First of all, I think that's great. I think
I was pretty proud.
Knowing you, I know it was based in brand research and customer insights
Tons of stuff, yeah.
And honestly doesn't feel risky. But having been on the agency side, how do you push a client towards an idea that is going to help their brand, is going to help their business?
Sure.
And they're reluctant in some way.
When you have clients that you have great relationships with, that you build trust with, that they know that you know your stuff, right? And you know that they know theirs. The truth is that once you've kind of earned that trust, and that kind of the integrity of the client and the integrity of the agency, and you're just trying to do good work together. Once you're kind of over that hurdle, it's not selling anymore. It's just trying to do the best work together to advance the brand.
Mm-hmm.
And I did that for Catholic Health Partners. I worked with Mercy Health for a while, and I was sitting around the room with a bunch of people one day trying to figure out how to solve some problems with competition and brand and that type of thing. And one of the people that I greatly respect said in the room, she was the chief marketing person at the time, said in the room, I think we're asking the wrong questions, right? I mean, and it takes, I think, courage to say that.
Yes.
That it's not about what's the next promotion. Maybe it's about who we are. Maybe it's about, saying some stuff that we haven't said in a while. Maybe and we ended up, and it was, yes, it was my idea, but it was our idea, that we would do a brand campaign. It was time that we didn't push a service line, that we didn't talk about, this, that, or this, but we re-informed the community about who we are, what we stand for, and why we're here. And we did a campaign called Mercy Moments. It's one of the best things I've ever touched. I think it did really good things for that client and that brand in the market. And it was well received, not just by the external public, but I remember being in showing the TV spot in a room with nurses and other staff, and we got done showing the spot after we rolled it, because we were rolled out internally first, and people were crying. They were so proud to be a part of that. We had captured it really well, who we are and what they wanted to stand for and how they wanted to represent themselves. And it really touched people within the organization. And that's always pretty good, litmus test too, on how you're doing, is if people in the organization get behind it. So.
Well, absolutely. And if you've reached an audience emotionally, you've reached them in a way that transcends logic sometimes even.
I fell in love with this business for that reason.
Mm-hmm.
I was at Domino's, and I was called by someone at Domino's and said we could really use some help in international. He goes, but we could use that help at the agency. And so they sent me over to the agency, Campbell Ewald, mm-hmm. And we came to an agreement where I would go to work for Campbell Ewald, but I run their international business. And while I was at Campbell Ewald, they have a university where you go through to make sure you're kind of walking in lockstep with their processes and how they do things and what their heritage is. And I was in a meeting where the creative director for Chevrolet was talking about a campaign they had done for the Chevy S10.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and at the time I was an S10 owner.
Okay.
So I was really interested in this, and I remember buying the truck, thinking to myself in my mind, I really like this because I was going away on the weekends. I was a young man. I was throwing stuff in the back. I was like, this is kind of a modern day equivalent of a man and his horse, right? And so I'm in this presentation where the guy's walking through the creative strategy, and he brings the creative strategy up on the screen, and the line literally says, modern day equivalent of a man and his horse. So somehow that went from strategy to creative to articulation and expression and sent out, and I caught it.
Yes, you
I don't know
did.
how I caught it, but I caught it. And what they said in their brain, I said in my brain, and it made me think to myself, I want to do that.
You were at Domino's Pizza. You left the agency, went to Domino's corporate headquarters in Ann Arbor, and you were at Domino's Pizza during a very, really foundational time in
Yeah, it
the
was
company's history.
yeah, it was
When
crazy.
because I worked there as well,
Yeah,
not a corporate, I believe a $2.6 billion company back then, owned by Tom Monahan, who
yeah,
also owned the Tigers and was a pretty eccentric,
yeah.
interesting individual. Tell me a little bit about Domino's Pizza during those days.
It was a great place because if you ran hard and worked hard and you performed, you were rewarded, you were acknowledged. And so, starting out as a marketing coordinator, ended up as a director of segmentation and customer information in the research department, and was promoted, I think, 6 times in 5 years or 5 and 6. It's confusing, but that's when Domino's was just hitting the national stage, and I was really blessed to be involved for being such a young professional to be involved in very big things.
Mm-hmm.
Just as an example, I was working directly with the agency on developing the marketing materials catalog and the brand standards guide. So when people say, how'd you get your start in branding? I'd say, well, I literally wrote the brand standards guides for Domino's Pizza back in the first one. And you helped me with the second thing I did. We worked on the local store marketing catalog and promotional tools. And that was, boy, you talk about great exposure. I remember part of it is just doing work because you like it and doing work
Yes.
when other people might not want to do it, right? So to so there were some real cool things to do at Domino's during that time. We were doing national TV. We were working with MTV. We were
I
doing some
remember.
stuff.
Yeah, we had Martha Quinn was on our TV
Yeah.
spots back then.
Yep. And
Martha Quinn, for those of you who don't know, was one of the original MTV VJs.
yeah, very cool, very famous at the
Mm-hmm.
time, very
Mm-hmm.
cutting edge at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And Domino's recruited it because they had this an awesome strategy, which I still refer to back today, was that Domino's came out with a strategy that was kind of cut up a little bit. If before 5, you make friends, and after 5, you make money, right? So they were
That's
doing,
interesting, right? Right.
yeah. So they were doing some really cool stuff around, brand and attitude and perception up until a certain point in the day, and then they'd still drop it in. But they kind of flipped the switch at that point, went to promotional because it was time to sell some pizzas,
Sure.
right? So that was kind of part of that campaign when we worked with Martha. But the interesting thing was, as a young marketer, I was offered opportunities to do things like I was the guy at photo shoot that people would look to and say, "Are we okay on brand? Does the product look good?" And that, yeah, the art directors and creative directors were all involved. But I remember being at one specifically. I mean, I'm 20, 23, 24 years old, and I'm on this set where they're filming this national stuff. And I remember one of the uniform guys showed up and he had a white T-shirt on, like I'm wearing here. And all of a sudden, somebody goes, "Hang on! Is that can he have that T-shirt on? Is that up to
Within the
standard?
brand standards, yeah.
Does he have to take that off? And like it got really quiet. Everybody like just turned towards me and looked at me, and I'm like, we're good.
Yeah.
We're good. Somehow this 23 or 24-year-old had, got
Had
to
the
make the
power.
decision on if it's good or not. And it was great. It was a great time to be there. There was such energy. You had a bunch of people who may not have known exactly what they're doing, but boy, the passion, these people would run through walls to make that company successful. And you had that from operations to marketing, uh, to the owner. And it was very exciting to be a part of.
It really did, I think, start with Tom Monahan.
Absolutely.
He built that chain,
Yeah.
and for people who don't know, the three dots on the Domino's represented his first three stores, right? And he was a hardworking guy, and the people that were running the company at that time were all people who had mostly started as delivery drivers.
Absolutely.
CEO at the time
Managers
was,
and worked their way up. Yep.
and they worked their way up, and it was a very hard driving, gritty, but fun, fast paced atmosphere.
Yeah.
I would say to those who are coming up in their career, if you can get with a young brand that's growing, do it, because as your experience has shown, you get exposure to a lot of different things, and
Great.
you're at a size of a company where you have the money to do that.
Yeah. It
Um,
was it was like such a compressed course in marketing, advertising, branding, all over. And we had a great agency at the time. They literally were a couple miles away,
right.
243.
They were great.
And there were some really bright people there, who just brought great ideas. And again, it's that team. It's the client who respects the agency, and the agency that respects the client, and knows that they both want the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, we had a couple people actually from the agency come over and join us. One of them was a guy I still look to and say he was a mentor for me, Glenn Mellinger. I don't know if you remember
I
Glenn.
remember Glenn. Yeah, absolutely.
And Glenn was he was smart, and he believed in freedom and responsibility, and he'd give you a chance if you wanted it. And he'd reward you if you did well. He acknowledged you. Just a great guy, great marketing mind, great manager. And there were those people kind of sprinkled throughout the organization, like there are most organizations, and you got to seek them out, right? And make sure that you are learning, not just, from the work you're doing every day, but from the people around you that make the most sense.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why they sent me to spend some time with you. You were knocking it down in the regional market, and they said, if you want to know how to do it in the regional market, go spend time with Rob Collins. And I
Yes.
did.
Let's move on from that. So the quirkiness of Domino's was pretty interesting. So a couple things that I remember, and I just want you to illuminate a little bit. You drive into the Domino's headquarters. First of all, it's a 3-story building that's like super long, like a half mile long or something ridiculous.
Quarter mile, I think, at least.
What's that?
Quarter mile, I think.
Quarter mile. And you didn't take the elevators because there were basically signs up that said, exercise and take the stairs. Because again, that was Tom. Tom was a fitness guy, and he was all about that. The farms, when you drove up though, you'd see buffalo and all these crazy animals, which is pretty interesting. And then the other thing I remember is Tom is a visionary and thinks very differently than other people. And
tough to keep up sometimes.
Very tough to keep up. In fact, post Domino's, he built a community down in Florida, Ave Maria, which is a Catholic-based community for Catholic education and studies. He's thinking like that. And he had a crazy car collection, I remember.
Yeah. He became very successful very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But it didn't change fundamentally who he was in terms of some of the things he wanted to pursue. He always wanted to own the Detroit Tigers. He just did it, right? And it was he believed in fitness, and it wasn't just that he told you to take the stairs. He built a fitness center.
Right.
He was one of the first in the country to have it was a world class.
It was sweet, yeah,
with a running track in it and weights and what a perk that was, right? And he believed in taking care of people who, if you wanted to work longer, harder, he wanted to make it easy for you. He had a fitness center. He had 3 or 4 restaurants on premise, dry cleaning, running shoe store, all the
Well,
things that you could want were there.
way before companies were doing that kind of
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
The campuses like that were uncommon.
Yep. And then I remember there being stories on it in national publications about the innovation
Mm-hmm.
of the things he was doing, and why people wanted to work for Domino's. And I just kind of, again, stumbled into the job. It was awesome. But to talk about the fitness approach, though, two people, I work with an Olympic gold medalist, Steve Frazier, and I worked with Jeff Kazmarek, who played in the NFL for a short time. These are the type of people that he believed in, because not just because they were successful, but because of their commitment to being successful. And I think he saw that in a lot of different people, that if you can commit to something like he did, whether it be athletics or business or a person, then he respected that.
He respected
it was pretty amazing.
commitment, discipline, right? Yeah. Hard work.
Yeah. Because that's how he became successful.
That's right. That's exactly. He was. I mean, his childhood story is tough, right? Yeah. And he really, like you said, he built an empire. And Kaz is still there, running Canada now.
He's vice president of marketing for Domino's Pizza Canada.
Right.
Which is one of their largest franchisees. But yeah, he's still there. He's still winning. He's an impressive guy. He's an impressive guy.
He is an impressive guy. Kaz, we're gonna have to have you on because you'd be great. You'd be great. So then you also worked for several years later, you worked for Domino's competitor. And what had happened in the pizza game, Pizza Hut started delivering, Domino's shares started going down. There was a lot of, the pizza wars were big during kind of your rise in your career.
Yeah, and you had kind of like the 3 big players, right?
Right. Pizza Hut, Domino's, and Little Caesars. So then you went over to Pizza.
Yeah, I did.
And ran international.
I didn't just go directly there, but yeah, I kind of did a small stint at an agency, and then wound up with a couple guys from Domino's ended up there. A guy by the name of Greg Rauco, who was their president of international on Little Caesars. He worked over at Domino's, and he went over there. And Stuart DeGusson, you know Stuart.
I know Stuart.
Stuart is again, you talk about a mentor.
Well, Stuart had been at Domino's.
Yeah, had been at Domino's and Wendy's before that, and then ended up at Caesars. And I remember seeing something that they were looking for a VP of international or whatever, and I was like, I missed the pizza business.
Mm-hmm. It's a fun business. Food can be really fun.
Veins, right? They say you get sauce in the veins. And
I've not heard that.
Right? That's yeah,
and, I like that.
It's hard to shake once you do it. I have a friend now who works for Marco's, and she worked at Domino's. And it's funny to compare the stories, but yeah, I went to Caesars because I sent a note off to Stuart, and I said, hey, if you're looking for somebody, who has a little bit of international experience but a lot of pizza experience, I'd be interested in talking to you. And I think a few weeks later, I was on a plane to Puerto Rico, where we were almost coincidentally where we were testing Hot and Ready at the time, and it was very successful there. And so Stuart, I think, was very instrumental in bringing that to the United States and potentially saving a lot of businesses at the time, because when there was a time when the pizza battles really heated up. It used to be Domino's owned delivery, Pizza Hut owned quality, and Caesar's owned value, right? And then Pizza started delivering, and Little Caesars made their pizza taste better. And all of a sudden, those things got jumbled, and the loyalty in the pizza segment became jumbled as well. Because if I can get my pizza delivered and it's just as good, why wouldn't I do that? Mm-hmm. And I think you remember when Pizza Hut entered the business, the delivery.
Oh yeah.
And everybody's heart missed a beat at Domino's, because there was a commercial that they did where the drivers kind of put their hands up in the air and then dropped their keys, and it's like, we deliver. That's all they would need to say. And so you had what was at the time, according to our focus groups and our taste panels, the best tasting, pizza was coming into our neighborhoods. And that was a wake up call, I think.
What was different about Little Caesars from a kind of a corporate culture standpoint?
there were some things that were the same.
Mhm.
I was an international, so that was in itself different, and I loved that part of being different because I felt like I had kind of earned my PhD in marketing with Domino's on the domestic side.
Mhm.
And both organizations make you spend time in the store. They make you understand operations. Um, there's an appreciation for marketing and operations working together. But international, the thing that's international that's different is that um, the things we do here don't translate there. So my PhD in marketing and pizza, in some ways, made a lot of sense because you'd go to a market like Honduras or Turkey or Guatemala or Puerto Rico, wherever you were going, and you'd have to kind of start at point zero. You have to understand their market. You have to understand what their promotional strategy is, what their competitors are. I think the best thing about that job was learning about different cultures.
Mhm.
You know, you can't help but be moved and influenced by what you saw when you travel abroad. And everything from Turkey, where I got to tell you, nicest people I've come in contact with. Perfect hosts, caring, inviting. What might be a lot different, I don't know. I can only speak to my own experiences, but very different than going down to Honduras, where the hosts were awesome, but there were armed guards on every corner,
Mm.
and I wasn't really allowed to leave without a bodyguard with me. So those type of things where you look back and go, good experience, good cultural exposure while helping businesses do well in those environments. And at the same time, it gives you a lot of perspective on what we have here as a country and what we should value in this country, um, because you've seen what the other side looks like.
Right.
Yeah.
We are coming up on our time here, Mr. Tipping. I do have a few more questions for you.
Okay, I'm ready.
Is there any public figure, mentor, speaker, author that has you followed where you said, "Man, that I get inspiration from that person"?
Yeah. Um, it's, in my younger days, I could say that there were people that I kind of tried to model and follow, and I was a sponge, and I was kind of just trying to absorb whatever I could get. I mentioned a couple of my mentors here. Um, as I've um, as I've kind of grown in my career, um, I find that learning will never stop for me, but um, sharing that experience and helping other people achieve their professional goals is probably more rewarding to me today than achieving my own. I know that sounds silly. It's not like I'm done climbing the mountain, but I really like helping other people climb up the mountain now too. So if you were to go to my LinkedIn page and read some of the things people say about me, I think I'm honored that people think I'm a great marketer. I'm blessed that people think I'm a good boss and a good mentor.
Mm-hmm.
And that kind of that has its own kind of reward. And so, what am I reading today? I don't read a lot of marketing stuff right now. If you were to write a book, I would read it.
That's coming. It just might be a little while.
But in terms of like I read some stuff a couple years ago. It changes so fast now. I follow some blogs. Um, most of my time today is spent learning about worldviews and interests. But if you ask me what I'm reading today, I'm reading simple stuff like Gary Sinise's book, you know, and stuff that I think will help me do some mind puzzling, not just marketing puzzling.
Right.
Sorry if that's a bad answer, brother.
No, it's a great answer. I like to do the same. I try to read inspirational books. I try to read marketing books. I try to mix it up a little bit. Brian, thank you. I appreciate you being here. Brand strategist, marketer extraordinaire, partner of the Jakes Group.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you for joining us on the Marketing Chief podcast. It was great
Thanks
having you.
It's been an honor, and I appreciate you giving me a chance to share some stories.
If you like what you hear on the Marketing Chief podcast, be sure to subscribe or follow on your favorite podcast app or YouTube, and give us a rating on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you next time on the Marketing Chief podcast.